Hello, Bridget. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Boaz, nice to be here. I'm Bridget Gleason, and I'm the Chief Sales Officer at Silk.
We are all keen to learn from your experience about using Slack for sales and sales processes, both internally and externally. We were asking to what extent they're using Slack for sales activities. Some said sporadically based on customers that ask them to do that. Some are only using it for enterprise. There are not so many people who are using it by default with all their prospects. How about you? When would you use it?
Yeah, I would say that at the different companies where I've been, it depends. My current company, we are very close partners with Microsoft. So we also do a lot with Teams, but we also use Slack. We use Slack with our customers. We tend to like to go where our customers go. And so we want to work in the channel where they work. So we're going to follow them as opposed to making them follow us. So in previous companies, it didn't matter the size, always used Slack for those interactions. You can have it at the engineering level, you can have it at the manager level. It's been super effective for us. And then also internally on the sales teams, we've used it internally very, very effectively.
Okay, that's interesting. Currently at Silk, you are a Microsoft shop, right? You're still using Slack to accommodate what your prospects and customers are using. That's very customer-centric approach. I love it. How early in the sales process would you set up a Slack channel or a Teams connection with them? Is it from the very first touch point, or would you wait with that a little bit? What's your take on that?
Again, it depends. Sometimes we've used it when we've had a hard time getting engagement. Let's say they're not as responsive and you invite them to Slack and they're more likely to reply and interact with Slack. It's a very light touch. So there are some circumstances where we use it because we've had a hard time getting engagement. Now, if that's not the case, let's say the engagement is fine and they're responsive very early in the process. And it's for the same reason. We found that our prospects, particularly we sell a technical product to technical people. It's a channel that they're familiar with and comfortable and doesn't feel so much like you're selling or they're being sold to. So it's a very natural communication they feel comfortable with. And again, Boaz, you and I, we're both like all about the customer. We want to work with them in a way and in a mode that they prefer. And oftentimes we found that that's where we get the most engagement.
Thank you. That's very interesting. So what I take from what you said is, one, this is almost not too early.
Nope.
And then it's a channel to enhance communication. Sometimes you go the traditional email, phone, Zoom, but that can actually boost the relationship, the ease of communication. And the third thing you said, if I got you right, is it's a way less official and therefore more casual and flowing and
natural.
Yeah, and when you are natural, everything goes easier and happier, and you get to know much more about the customer. If they feel that they're not on a very official communication, they even start using the channel to communicate between themselves, and you learn
Correct.
a lot from the inner discussions there.
Right, by being sort of witness to what they're talking about. Agreed.
At WorkNet, we talk a lot with prospects and then customers of ours who love Slack, but at scale, they find it a little messy to work with. I mean, when you get to deal with dozens and hundreds of channels, and we heard of companies who cease using Slack right after the deal is signed. So they're just using it for a sales process, the deal is signed, close one, and that's it. Have you experienced anything like that? And
No.
what's your take on?
No.
Tell me about it.
The sale, I don't consider the sale ever really done. It's never done. And so you continue. No, I've never heard that. Let's just say no.
Okay, that's music to my ears, because when we worked together, we looked at the customer, even when they were just prospect, we treated them as if they were our customers. They just don't know it yet. They just didn't
Right.
start paying us yet. So it's a whole journey. Why
Right.
stop it? If you don't have the right tools to manage it, go find the right tools and make your life easier to manage.
Well, where I've seen get messy at a previous company, we not just with customers, but internally, we didn't do email, or we did so little email. Everything was Slack. Thing was Slack. And at first, I didn't get it, and it was noisy, and it's pinging me, and it's going, and there's all this happening. And but over time, I mean, it still can be noisy in the chatter, but the transparency of it, and there were so many positives that it was worth trying to figure out how to make it work in all the messiness that can be there with Slack. So I haven't seen the messiness with customers in channels. It's more when you layer in, all the different channels. What I found internally, when you're using it as your primary communication tool internally, which is what we did, I never had to check email. Everything was Slack. Everything was Slack.
Got it. And I loved what you say and how determined you said no, because sales never end. Can you share with me a little bit about the ongoing post-sales sales opportunities that you can pick on, especially when using Slack and everything is so not just open and less official, but also with so many different personas on the line, how you and your teams use that for further sales, for upgrades, for expansion, etc.
Yeah, I think so. Again, it's sort of surprising to me that anyone would not continue to use it once the sale has been completed, because you want to make sure that you keep these different touch points, that you're not just communicating when there's a renewal, that you're not just communicating when maybe there's a maintenance issue. But let's say, for example, there is an issue of some sort, either on the customer side or a problem or on our side. It is a really great way to chat and to stay in almost synchronous communication. And I just find that it strengthens that relationship. So we have a very large customer, and we're very active on Slack with them. And when a bunch of us all met for the first time in person, oh yeah, I would see you on Slack, and a little bit about them, the way they post, their style. And so I think there's something about the familiarity that's very helpful. There's something about ongoing communication that you have. There's something about being able to, if we see that there's somebody that's on Slack that's maybe at a different level, we can bring someone in at that level to join that conversation or to respond. So I just see that there's a lot of different ways to use it. And again, we're going to go and communicate the way that our customers want to be communicated. And Slack just enables some of that. That's where we found that a lot of them want to be.
That's fantastic. And I can hear you're all for using Slack. With that, Slack has some downsides as well. What are the main concerns using Slack for sales activities? Things like distracting product and engineering teams that are now being pulled in and being constantly utilized. You cannot always commit to be 24/7 available for questions. And there is this expectation. It's an immediate messaging. So why don't you answer immediately? You can miss messages, especially if it's in threads, and you don't get any notifications for that. And the cost of it can be very high. So have you experienced any concerns or difficulties using Slack for sales?
So the ones that you just mentioned, I would say have been the most acute are missing messages and threads. That's finding things is sometimes difficult. Like, where was that again? What thread was that in? So that would also be a challenge. And then, gosh, this expectation around I messaged you. Everything feels urgent. You
Yes.
know, it's hard to say, no, this one is really important unless you have a special channel for this is important. And then people can abuse that channel also. So I think the expectation of answer right away and also setting a customer expectation as well. I would say the ones that you mentioned, we definitely experience as well. And I don't have any good answers for how to get around it. I mean, it's every company's a little different. People on the teams are a little bit different. I think communication about how we're using it and what the expectation is when you send me a Slack message doesn't mean that I'm sitting there waiting.
Yeah, only for you. So, but I do want to double click on that one, please, on the expectation setup. Is that fair, in your opinion, to do some expectation settings when you just start using it or when it gets a little bit out of hand from a time perspective, work time, like office hours, weekends? Now, what's your take on that? Is that legit?
I think it's essential. I think where we get into conflict is when appropriate expectations are not set. And so if you don't have that discussion, then my expectation might be, Boaz, whenever I send you something, I expect you're going to reply within 5 minutes. And you may be thinking, I never said I was going to reply within 5 minutes. And so I've seen that with a salesperson, a customer success or an engineer of some sorts, and a customer. And where the salesperson would say, why aren't you on it? 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 And the sales engineer would be, because I got 18 other things I'm doing. And so we did have to have discussions around what's the right expectation. Also, so the salesperson, if it has to do with the customer, is setting the right expectation. If we tell a customer we're going to respond, if we set the expectation within 4 hours, I'm making it up, then they're not going to be upset if it's within 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't say anything, they may have something set in their mind that's not realistic. So I do think it's really important.
Thank you. And what I take from what you said is setting expectations, not just externally with the customer, but also internally with my peers. Because
Yes.
I know some salespeople who can be really demanding because that's all they see in life. Yeah, I'm looking at you. That's all they see in life. And you know what? That's what they should do. And they should be fearless, ice cold hunters. Yes, I love that. Towards the end of this session, is there one thing you'd like to recommend the audience who's listening to us today to avoid when using Slack for sales? The one big no-no.
Don't abuse the channel.
Boom. I love that.
Don't abuse it. It's a privilege. And I think if you too much noise, they'll ignore you just like they will other channels. So make sure that your communication is on point and it's relevant and it's respectful. So don't use it.
I love it because there's this tendency, oh, while I have you here, download some more.
Right.
Yes.
Don't do that.
Okay. Perfect. Because if it was to be in an email, you would probably dedicate a whole email for that and you would not mix it. Perfect. I love that. So don't abuse the system. Okay. It was a pleasure as always. So thank you.
Boaz, my pleasure. I look forward to the next time. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye, Boaz.